Good evening, and welcome to the Crown Hill Journey. I'm Christina Apt, the author of Crown Hill, and your host for this evening's reading. First of all, happy Easter, everyone. I hope that, and happy Passover if you are celebrating that as well. I hope that today was a good day for you. We feel so disoriented in so many ways. We can't be together, we can't hug, we can't do Easter egg hunts, all those things that we're used to doing. So I think it's really important to acknowledge that this is a challenging time, but everything we're doing and staying home and doing what we can is really important and it matters. So happy Easter. I hope it was a good day. I do want to do a shout out to my friend Janice. She's at home alone. She's had a very tough year family-wise, and today I noticed her posting and we talked back and forth. She still got dressed up. She still had a nice brunch. She put a pork tenderloin in the oven, even though she's all by herself. And really, that's the enduring spirit that we are all showing these days. So for whatever you did today to make sure that Easter was a special day for you, I celebrate you. I honor you. And here's a little toast to you. It's some Prosecco left over from my Easter brunch. So here's to you and the good job you did celebrating Easter and the holiday season this week, or however you did it. Cheers. Crown Hill. Tonight we are at the end of Book 2, Chapter 14. We will be rejoining Edward and Sir Arthur Conan Doyle and Rose and a few other people along the way in this last chapter of this second book. As you might remember, last night, kind of all hell broke loose. There were spirits. There was more than one spirit. It was clear that Mary was there coming through Rose as her vehicle. But then there's this evil that comes back and pretty much orders the house and Mary and tells them the terms of what life will be for them going forward. So tonight we are going to go back to the dining room. We are going to join Sir Edward and Arthur and Rose and a couple of other people who show up along the way. So let us get started. Crown Hill, a novel of love, life, and the afterlife. Book 2, Edward, Chapter 14. Upon her collapse, Edward gathered Rose and placed her limp body on the settee in the parlor. At the same time, he barked at Agnes to bring him some cool water and a washcloth. If nothing else, the task would keep the housekeeper out of the way long enough for Edward and Doyle to quickly assess what had happened and how best now to proceed. "Well, my friend, I would say that we have bloody well had the answer to our question." Sir Arthur spoke first. "There is definitely a spirit present within Crown Hill, and whomever it may be, they have clearly chosen young Rose as their medium." Edward tried to process his experienced friend's words while gently loosening the collar of Rose's dress and brushing sweat-soaked strands of hair from her eyes. He agreed. The events of the last few minutes proved that there was a spirit present in Crown Hill. The issue now became identifying that spirit and understanding what it wanted. "What should we do now, Doyle?" "Well, it would seem that young Rose is the key to connecting with this spirit. What I find most startling about the entire episode of events is that the spirit channels through the child without any formal connection. No seance or conjuring of the spirit world. In all my years, I have never been witness to anything quite like it." Edward, too, was struck by Rose's ability to directly connect with the other side, although his wonder was offset by concern over the intensity of the spirit who was clearly manipulating the delicate girl. What did it all mean? Where had this spirit been for the years previous that he and his family had summered at Crown Hill? And what of his family? How would he ever assure them that they were safe to return once they learned of this haunting event? Questions shuffled through Edward's mind more furiously than he was able to process them. His thoughts were short-circuited, however, as Rose began stirring and Agnes returned to the parlor. Here's the water and the cloth, as you asked. Agnes set the items on the table next to the settee where Rose still lay, unconscious. I also opened some smelling salts. Accepting the uncapped bottle, Edward slipped one hand under Rose's head and raised her toward the ammonia nitrate wafting into the air. With one inhale, Rose was awake and railing against the pungent gas. Edward quickly set the bottle down and gently elevated the weakened child to a sitting position. Judging by her grayish tone, it would be some time before she was fully recovered. As Rose struggled to regain consciousness, Sir Arthur stepped into view. "Hello, my dear child. I'm sure that you feel a bit disoriented at the moment, but all that has happened is that you fell faint. As you are able, take a few deep breaths and slowly let your mind return. You are safe and in good care." Rose's unfocused glance toward Sir Arthur made it clear that while conscious, she was far from coherent. In fact, Rose's disjointed motions were such that Edward feared the child might relapse into an unconscious state. He turned to request that Agnes prepare one of her medicinal teas, but the housekeeper had disappeared. Frustrated, Edward turned to Doyle with instructions. "I'm going to the kitchen to brew Rose a cup of tea. Stay by her side and perhaps place a cool cloth on her forehead to help restore her wits." Edward set off to the kitchen, where he prepared a pot of mint tea. He seemed to recall Maria served it whenever the girls were upset. As he allowed the tea to steep, the gently fragrant leaves ministered their calming effect upon him as well. No doubt the events of the afternoon had been disturbing, but with Sir Arthur's help, he was resolved to find a way to deal with the invasive spirit, ensure Rose's well-being, and restore Crown Hill as his family's beloved summer home. Edward had to believe that all three of these things were possible. Pouring the tea into one of Maria's sturdy porcelain cups, Edward momentarily pondered Agnes's whereabouts. His thoughts transformed as he delivered tea to the parlor and found Rose greatly recovered. "Well, young lady, you're looking much improved. Here, I have brewed some tea for you to sip." "Thank you, Mr. Randall, but might you have a piece of chocolate?" "Actually, old boy, she's been asking for candy since you departed the room," Sir Arthur remarked as he gently raised the cup to Rose's lips. "I do have chocolate, as a matter of fact," Edward replied, "but I'm not really sure it's the best thing for you at this moment." "I really don't think it could hurt, old boy," Sir Arthur chimed in, to which Rose added, "Actually, my mother allows me a chocolate whenever I have a spell like this. She says it helps me to recover." Edward was about to question Rose more closely about such spells when a loud commotion engulfed the house. At first sound, it was like a maelstrom of arguing women. As the turmoil advanced, Edward recognized one of the voices as Agnes, in concert with another familiar but not quite identifiable woman. It was only seconds before the additional person became known as Rose's mother, Elizabeth Jennings, burst into the parlor with Agnes close behind. "Rose, what has happened to you? What have these terrible men done?" Without pause, Elizabeth pushed aside Sir Arthur, swept her daughter into her arms, and venomously turned towards Edward. "You low-life, self-important miscreant! You have the audacity to call yourself a gentleman, respectfully devoted to your wives and daughters, yet as soon as you have an opportunity, you make improper advances on my innocent child, just because you think we are a lower class than your fancy Dan highfalutin society friends. It's all right to do unspeakable things to my little girl." Edward and Sir Arthur stood stunned, frozen in place by the woman's venomous barrage. "Thank goodness Agnes came to the Spauldings to tell me what happened here today," Mr. High and Mighty Edward Randall, how dare you hold my daughter against a wall while she cried to be released? And you, Sir Conan Doyle, you worthless excuse for a nobleman hiding under a table and allowing my daughter to be ravaged? You both disgust me. Mother, please, stop, stop. Rose sobbed as her mother's anger overflowed the room. The young girl desperately tried to intervene, but in reality, she could not speak the truth of what happened. Rose could not admit that she had endured another of her awake dreams in front of Agnes, Mr. Randall, and Sir Arthur. Elizabeth had drummed it into her daughter's head to never admit such a thing publicly. Other than pleading with her mother to stop accusing Mr. Randall of unspeakable actions, Rose was powerless. I am taking my daughter out of here, and I tell you, as God is my witness, she will never return. And if I ever hear either of you have made an attempt to see her or contact her, I will call the police and have you arrested and charged. And Agnes, I fully expect and demand that you will attest to all of this. The housekeeper was as immobilized by the situation as both men. Hearing her name, she blankly nodded in hopes that her accord would help end the unfolding nightmare. Elizabeth made her way to the parlor doorway with Rose tightly tucked in her arms. Before exiting, she turned directly toward Edward one last time. You will never speak of this to anyone. Do you hear me? No one. Nothing ever occurred here with my daughter but some note-taking. Do you understand? Edward knew that a question was being asked, but his thunderstruck brain was unable to process or produce a reply. Randall, I say, Randall, I believe she's looking for a response, Sir Arthur whispered. I suggest that you at least nod. The barrister bobbed his head once in affirmation, and with that singular motion, Elizabeth and Rose were gone, Agnes following in lockstep behind. Neither Edward nor Sir Arthur spoke as they moved from the parlor through the dining room and out to the porch. Their shared silence continued as they settled into their chairs and stared out at the Lake Erie shoreline. As moments turned into hours, the two men found themselves facing the setting sun with volumes of questions, but no answers, no explanations. All that remained were resounding echoes of Elizabeth Jennings' horrible accusations and the vague knowledge that a spirit had somehow been involved in the chaos. And in time, the slowly evolving realization that their lives would never again be the same. Darkness and silence. It had been my existence for many years following Mary's death, until the Randall family came into my world, bringing joy and light into my being. Now, here I was, once again, plunged into the blackened world of despair and isolation. In the days after Elizabeth's enraged exit, Sir Arthur and Edward made a number of attempts to channel Mary's spirit. I added my support to their efforts as well, but as we soon discovered, my sweet Mary was gone. To where, I had no idea. After days of uneventful seances, both men agreed that their spiritual endeavors were in vain. With little hope, Sir Arthur departed for the nearby spiritual community of Lilydale. Before leaving, he offered Edward a promise to stay in close contact. He also extracted a pledge from Edward to remain faithful to the hope that one day my rooms would again be filled with his family's love and laughter. Edward deeply pondered that promise in the days following Sir Arthur's departure. With his wife and daughters fully settled at Bear Lake, and Agnes no longer willing to work in his employ, a return to normalcy within my shelter seemed increasingly impossible. While Edward loved my natural beauty and the peaceful wonder of my being, he found the deep silence now pervading my every room completely disorienting. The onerous circumstances also clarified the extent to which he valued his family above all else. No matter the strong connection that had once existed between us, I no longer mattered in Edward Randall's world. Resolutely, Edward set in motion a plan that transported his family's valued possessions back to Buffalo and would sell all that remained to the next person to become my owner. He then met with an Eden real estate broker. He set a low market price and signed all necessary paperwork to facilitate my immediate sale. I was to be sold and quickly become part of his past. On Edward's last morning in my care, he arose early and thoughtfully wandered through each of my rooms, traversing every floor and strolling my grounds. Ultimately, he ended on my porch, a setting that this special man had always cherished. Together, we shared the morning sunrise as it came to fullness in the blushing sky. Crown Hill, I shall miss you, Edward spoke to me as an old friend. I wish that I could understand the secrets you hold deep within your comforting walls and beneath your protective roof. But despite my best efforts, I cannot. So I leave you today in fond farewell for the gracious life you have provided my family and myself. Know that you will always hold a sacred place within my heart, and as well as any person can, I will always feel an abiding love for you. The sight of Arthur Smith turning into the driveway gave Edward notice that his departure time was at hand. Passing through the dining room, Edward collected his suitcase and briefcase. There, he stopped for one last look around the room where his life had forever changed. Whoever you are, and wherever you may be, I wish you peace and the ability to find your way to the light. It was a melancholy moment, amplified by Edward's departure and the fact that Mary was nowhere within me to hear his final wishes. Over the ensuing months, I once again became mirrored in darkness and silence, without anyone, including my beloved Mary, within my shelter. So sad, right? We think of all the ways that as people, we struggle through buying, selling, living in houses, and yet it's interesting to think about how the house might feel. If you've ever lived in a home that has meant something to you in those ways, or is an older home where you've had experiences, I think you can understand that ideal. Whether it's true or not, I don't know, but Crown Hill for me was that kind of house. It was a real being, and I always felt as if it held the secrets of everyone who had lived there. That is the end of Edward's book, book 2. Yeah, Peggy, it is sad, and I feel that way. The house and I aligned, right? And so now we will start tomorrow night, book 3, and it is Meg. Meg is a woman who comes to the house in 1995. She is newly divorced and looking to start again, which was exactly who I was. I won't say Meg is me by any means, but it was certainly a part of what I wrote. The one thing I would like to tell you tonight before you go away, there are a couple of things. First is this, the subtitle of this book is A Novel of Love, Life, and the Afterlife. And while the afterlife is certainly part of it, as you've already heard, this book is about love, but on love on many levels. The first and foremost is the love of a person for their home. And I think that when you have a home that is meaningful to you, you develop that love. When you walk in the door, you're welcome. It's a place of solace. It's your peaceful place against whatever's going on in the world. You come home and it's your special place. It's also, as you're going to find out now with Meg, it's the love of a town, of people for their town. 1995, book 3, and Meg is set in Eden. It's very realistic to the real story of the house, Crown Hill, that exists in the town of Eden, and the way the people in the town care about each other and care about their town. And then it's also love for each other, whether it's on a family level, as Edward and his wife and children were clearly a devoted family to each other. And as you're going to see with Meg, love of her pet, her dog. She has a dog you're going to enjoy meeting, and well as maybe there's a little romance coming for Meg as well. So love on many levels. And I think that's what was so important to me, to make sure that it was love on so many different levels that you could relate to. Anyone could relate to some part of that. Aside from that, I don't think there's much else to tell you other than the Meg is the 3rd book and will be 19 chapters, and we'll tie up all our loose ends from Mary in 1884 to Edward in 1922 and through to Meg in 1995. So thank you so much for joining me on this special Easter evening. It is such a joy to look forward to being with you every night and sharing the Crown Hill journey. So thank you. Happy Easter. Little bubbly to share, and have a great rest of your evening. If you did not get the chance today to see Andrea Bocello, who did a concert from Italy at 1 o'clock this afternoon, it's still available on YouTube. It was a beautifully spiritual experience, so go back and watch it if you are so inclined. And in the meantime, have a great night, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow night at 7:30. Thank you.